Best of r/entitled parents episode 57. This takes place at my local Walmart. Bad things always happen at Walmart. E.g. entitled grandmother EC entitled child M manager S savior. Backstory. Me and my mom were getting gifts and such for family, and we're in the toy aisles getting Lego sets for my 6-year-old cousin. EC, can I get this box of Legos? E.g. I don't think so, that's almost $100, get a different one. EC, but mommy would get it for me. E.g. I don't see how your mother would be able to afford that considering she's always asking me for money. Entitled grandchild walks over to a woman's cart and opens her purse while her back is turned. Excuse me, what are you doing? EC, will you buy this box of Legos for me? I'm sorry but no. E.g. excuse me? Why is that? I have other people to buy presents for, I can't buy anything for him. Sorry. E.g. you don't have a ring, you must be single, who could you possibly be buying for? That's none of your business, please leave me alone. E.g. ugh, I can't stand these ugly whores in this town. The woman was actually very attractive and couldn't be any older than 25. The child starts screaming and throwing things off the shelves and breaks a huge robot $200-ish. Now you have to pay for however much that costs, when you could have just paid half for the Lego set for your heathen manager. Is everything okay over here? E.g. this woman is being very rude to my grandchild and calling him names. A couple other witnesses told the true story, including me and my mom. The grandma was taken out of the store and had to pay for everything she had broken and had to put back a couple items in order to do so, including 4 other Lego sets. P.S. sorry if anything's messed up, I'm on mobile right now. Thank you. Next. So for a background, this was back when the Xbox 360s came out for promotionals like Lego Star Wars 3. Both my older brothers had Xbox 360s at the time, my eldest having the original 360 and my second eldest have the 360s. It was around my 13th birthday when I asked my parents for an Xbox 360 so I could play my own games. As it turns out, my parents got me an Xbox 360 with a dual antenna adapter, which were around $30-40 at the time, which came with the Xbox 360 and a brand new controller. I was thrilled. The last time I was this excited was when I got the PSP with Star Wars Battlefront 2. But it was on the very same day, my birthday, when all my family and friends left our house when the complaints and older brother, entitlement began. The story. So after everyone was gone, I began to set up the 360 in my room. I had a small white TV with only the yellow and white aux plugs, and Jay pulled out Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary and Ruse the Art of Deception. Not only did I save up 2 weeks worth of Xbox Live trial cards to play with friends, I finally had the Xbox to use them on. My brother followed me closely and saw the dual adapter come out of the box. At first he was surprised it came with it and was happy for me. But then he realized I was going to get a better internet connection than he was, so he went to his Xbox in the basement and grabbed his adapter, single antenna, and came to my room. By this time, I was already connected to the internet and doing the needed system updates to play online, and the first thing he did was give me his adapter. He said, since I am the older brother and have had an Xbox longer than you, I deserve to have the new adapter. I was dumbfounded that he would demand something that WSS given to me on my birthday. I gave his adapter back to him and told him it was my adapter and I just got it since it was still my birthday. He was furious at me and tried to rip the adapter out after he turned off my Xbox and pushed me aside. That is when my parents came upstairs and pulled EB away in their room. You could hear him crying, screeching and demanding that since he was older and had suffered long enough with the single antenna adapter, that he deserves my antenna but that I should just give him my Xbox and controller to him instead. My parents told him it was still my birthday and they would decide on what to do. He left the room and ran downstairs. It wasn't until a few days later that my parents told me to surrender my adapter for my brothers because they thought it was unfair. I stated it was unfair for me to give up the dual adapter since I barely got 3 bars worth of connection in my room anyways, and my brother received 3 bars connection with his single adapter and could play multiplayer fine. They then told me that it was up to me to be a good Catholic child and give it to my brother, or to be selfish and keep it for myself. That was more my mother's part in saying and doing. I felt betrayed by her actions but decided to keep it to myself. After the course of 2 years, my brother and I fought over the adapter until my Xbox started breaking my games. I lost 5 games to the Xbox and had it returned for a new Xbox. My brother complained but he had no say in the matter. We actually went to GameStop 3 times that day. Since the first exchange had the red ring of death, the second exchange was the same as the first. My dad was furious that we were given 2 faulty products in the course of 2 hours. The store manager apologized for the inconvenience and gave us a practically brand new Xbox 360s free of charge. After that, my brother tried to get this Xbox but failed. He stayed with his single adapter until he paid for a double adapter himself. Thank you. Next. Cellphone. Sorry for any weird formatting. So my mother is a Karen but also a Kevin. Entitled and narcissistic with absolutely no sense of timing or honestly common sense. A little background on her that is relevant is my mom has been through serious trauma, 2 very abusive relationships with her baby daddies, rape, miscarriages and a stillborn, and loss of 3 children. And I fully understand that's not something that is easily gotten over for lack of a better term. However, my mother is the biggest attention whore on earth and will exaggerate / flat out lie to get any kind of sympathy she can. When telling her tragic stories, and believe me she tells them very often, my mother embellishes a lot. And I know this simply due to having heard these stories so often that I pick up on the conflicting new details. This in mind, onto the story. I just gave birth to my son 5 weeks ago. He is my second child. During the first 2 days my son lost 12% of his body weight and had to have an extended stay as we frantically tried to get his weight back up and figure out why he wasn't gaining. 5 weeks later and his chunky butt is perfectly fine BTW. But during these few days I was a nervous wreck and also missing my toddler who was staying with my mother. So on the most hectic day of the hospital stay my husband had to return to work and I was having an emotional breakdown. My mother came with my daughter to offer support. I was grateful but very quickly ended up losing my temper. Enter my mom. She immediately decided to make this room her stomping grounds for attention. The nurses were in my room nearly constantly with my son, taking him in and out of the room, checking on him and me, etc. Every nurse got trapped by my mother who would pick up my son and make this huge display of caring on him, kissing him, which she was told many times not to, and generally making an obnoxious, fake fuss over him in their presence. When that didn't warrant her enough attention she changed her strategy. The pediatrician switched my son to a high-calorie formula and we fed him with a tube and a syringe and the nursing staff was in the room each feeding to help me. Mom used this to her advantage. She would immediately bring up my brother, who was sick the moment he was born and died a horribly painful death at 15. She brought up how terribly sick he was. How she was told he wasn't going to live and he was even smaller than this one, gesturing to my son who then weighed just under 7 pounds. Then she would say how he was so messed up because his father beat me so severely when I was 7 months pregnant that it damaged my baby and I was on bed rest until he was born. That went to how my biological father raped her and held her hostage in an abusive relationship. She brought up how her babies, my 2 older brothers, were born very prematurely and both died in the hospital. One of them had a tube to feed him too. And both of them failed to thrive and she had to watch her newborns die. This is not what I want to hear when my seemingly healthy newborn dropped a pound in weight in 2 days and went from breastfeeding like a champ to being fed with a tube, with the hospital staff debating putting a feeding tube in. Whenever the pediatrician or my OB came in to talk to me / check on us, my mother would interrupt to ask some ridiculously stupid question like, so if he has to have a feeding tube to get his weight up, it will come back out right. Then she would interject her sad stories of her sick, dying babies and her rape / abuse / pain. After hearing this for the 10th time in just a few hours, and I forgot to mention my 2-year-old who repeats everything, was in the room and she has since picked up the word rape, I broke down and cried. I ugly cried while holding my newborn to my chest and my daughter cuddled at my side. My mom looked at me, then wiped a non-existent tear and said, I look just like that, crying just like that, when I held my babies for the last time. I finally flipped mid-tears and screamed at her to stop making it about her, that not everyone wants to hear her abuse stories on repeat for hours, that my baby, her grandson. Thank you. Next. SD. Savisa Dogisa. Emotional support animal EM, entitled Mom Me, duh. I'm in high school and in a waiting line for my SD. I had just finished for the day and stood outside main building waiting for a friend. That's when I saw EM standing there with her 2 kids and a Basenji. The Basenji had a pink harness on with a patch on both sides, but I couldn't read what it said from the distance. I thought, hey, nice, SD. Well, until more people got out of the main building. The SD started barking and dragging EM towards the menace students, and it was on a flexi, so EM had to pull her SD back while doing stupid SSSSSS sounds to make it quiet down. Obviously didn't work. By now I was starting to realize it was a fake SD or a bad ESA and walked towards the EM and the SD. The SD tried jumping on me and the EM had to yet again pull it back. I could see the text on the harness. It said emotional support on one side and service dog on the other. WTF. Is it a service dog? I asked. Yes, it's for my 2 kids. EM replied, what tasks is it trained to do? Thank you. Next. Backstory. When I was about 8 or so, I lived in an apartment. It was relatively big, about 40 stories. My parents, my brother and I lived on the 14th floor, and we had a cool street view from our room. We shared a room. We were just relaxing out on the balcony when the doorbell rings. My parents' room was closer to the door, so my mom went and opened the door. O-P, me, M, my mom, D, my dad, EM, entitled Mom, there's a difference. AM, apartment management, B, my brother, SK, strange kid. Anyways, key rattling. Out in the hallway, I heard someone cursing under their breath. M, opens door. M, can I help you? EM, excuse me, what are you doing in my room? M, what? EM, my room. You are in my room right now. M, no, this is my room. My family and I live here. EM, you are such a liar. EM pushes past my mom and sets her stuff down. It was then when I realized the kid with her, who also comes in, and promptly drops his smoothie on the floor. We lived near a smoothie shop. Meanwhile, I'm just watching the whole thing play out from the end of the hallway. EM approaches me. EM, what are you doing here, you little turd? OP, what's a turd? EM proceeded to list every single alternate word for turd. Being the immature 8-year-old I was, I began giggling. SK, laughing. EM, hush. Slaps SK. My dad had gone downstairs to get the management. He arrives back upstairs just after the slap happened. SK starts crying. AM, what's going on? EM, this BTCH stole my room. I was super scared at this point and didn't really know what to do, so I just ran back to my room and closed the door. B, what's going on out there? OP, there's an angry lady yelling at mom. B, huh. B leaves room to spectate. Angry EM noises. I don't really remember much after that, other than that the management dragged her out of the room and only then did she realize her room was on the 15th floor. TL. Dr. EM refuses to admit that she is in the wrong apartment room. Thank you. Next. So, 2 weeks ago, just around Christmas, my GF got into a huge fight with her mother. Her mother lives in South Korea, where GF's family is from, and has been out of her life for years until this Christmas. She wanted GF to fly out to see them for the holidays, yet refused to help her buy the things she needed, especially the plane ticket. GF and I aren't exactly well off, so forking over $1,000 for her to fly out to Asia wasn't going to happen. And apparently this makes GF a lazy bitch to her mother, and she blocked her number and had refused to talk to her. Even the rest of GF's family has pretty much excluded her from their lives. GF didn't take this too well. She was in a foul mood for what felt like the entire 2 weeks. But about 5 days after, she gets a text. It was from her mother. She had unblocked her number and wanted to talk things out between them. Apparently she felt like she made a mistake. GF ranted and cried to her mother in Korean, so I didn't understand the word they were saying, but eventually, she started smiling, and she hung up the phone after a while. GF, she's coming out here to see me. Wait, okay, I was happy for her and all that, but this was the same woman who practically disowned her for not being able to afford a plane ticket. And now suddenly, she's the one who is buying the ticket to come here? It made no sense. and I was telling her something felt really fishy, but she was just so ecstatic about seeing her mom for the first time in years. And I couldn't take that feeling away from her. I was still gonna be there in case something happened, though. And spoiler, something did happen. Note, her mom never met me before this, but I sent her a long message about how I felt about her after her little tirade, and she wasn't very happy with it. So I expected her to be a little pissy with me. Well, after about a week since they talked, the doorbell rang. GF went to the door, and there she was. Her mother. And from the way she was dressed and the way she looked, I have a feeling she's the Asian version of a Karen. No blonde streak in her hair, but it was cut like you would see on an American Karen. They hugged tightly and cried in each other's arms. But as soon as she saw me, she let GF go and reached her hand out to me. I didn't want to shake her hand, but I did. I was mostly non-existent while they caught up. She was telling me what they were telling each other in Korean, and GF pretty much had to retell her life story from the day her mom left her. She told her about graduating high school, and then beauty school, her ex-boyfriend who thankfully got his drunk ass arrested, and how she was living on her own until meeting me. EM seemed to be interested in her story, but I was noticing that she seemed much more interested when GF had to retell the bad things that she went through. Not even a reaction out of her when she mentioned me. It eventually came to this point, and thankfully, GF interpreted it for me pretty quickly. Basically, EM, hearing about all the bad things she's gone through while being in debt from school and her abusive ex, it must have been the solid evidence to unfold her little scheme. Yep, I knew it was an act the whole time. EM, do you miss being home? GF, well, I guess, but I'm happy here. EM, but look at what this country has done to you. Look at how you live. You can't be happy here. GF, I am happy here, and I'm happy being with OP. Victory dance in my head. EM, but your whole family misses you. I miss you too. Come on, we all want you back home with us. GF, I'm not going back after what you said to me. I thought you came here to make things up to me. EM, but I already have plans for you back home. There's a nice apartment for you to live in, there's a salon looking for a hairstylist, everything is there and waiting for you. She then grabs GF's hand and starts shouting incoherently at her in Korean. GF was trying to be reasonable and refusing to move, but her mom was getting more and more pushy and violent. So, I did what I could do without getting arrested, and I forced the woman off of GF and towards the door, telling her to get out. I didn't understand her, but GF eventually told me she was blaming me for changing her daughter. I grabbed my phone to call the police, and EM took off after GF shouted what I was doing. She was shaking. I had to hold her for a minute before we could hear EM outside, shouting at our apartment. I looked out the window. This woman was throwing stones at the house, still rambling. Yup, that's all I needed. 1-911 call and 5 minutes later, 2 cops pulled up. I wanted to try and explain what was going on, but GF did it for me. GF, please just get her away from me. GF explained to the police about her, and that she just wants that woman out of her life and back in Asia, both of us agreeing we won't press charges if she just gets on the next plane and leaves. They agreed, and as far as I know, they had to escort her to the airport that she had just left that morning, and had to wait 9 hours with this crazy woman that doesn't know a lick of English and was probably yakking their ears off. I don't know anything about what happened next, but neither of us has seen EM since. So I just assume she got on the plane and went back home. GF apologized and knew that it was just an attempt to get her back to South Korea the whole time, but just missed her family so much and wanted to start things fresh with her mom. We are fine now, and I've been trying to get her to spend a little time with my mom, so she will at least have a mother figure in her life. We'll see how that turns out. Thank you. Next. Cast, me, EM, entitled Freddy Krueger. Backstory, my dad was married to this creature for 6 years, and don't ask me how he was able to stay with her so long. I'm still trying to figure that out. Also, before this incident I have to add that I was in kind of an accident years before I met her. My stepdad, really kind man, is a construction project manager, and he had to fire one of his employees for doing drugs on a project. So this former employee cracked out of his mind, decided to drive up to our house and chuck a brick at our window. Well, as you can guess, throwing things while high on crack doesn't really work that well, so he was aiming for our living room window and missed by 3 feet while driving by. The brick flew and hit me dead center in the skull as I walk out the door. Well, a emergency room trip, brain surgery, metal plate, and a 3-1/2 week medically induced coma later. I was basically good minus a concussion and I was a little sensitive to light. So onto the story. I was visiting my dad and stepmom was in one of her moods and asked me to do something while I was recording for a video project I had the next week. I said I couldn't because I had to finish my project. The conversation is as follows. Listen, just do what I say or I'll take your computer. Me. You didn't pay for it. I did. You know I had to work on this over the weekend. Don't yawl back to me, you failure. She used this as an insult to us, but it never really worked because it didn't make sense. Do what I say or I'll get your father. Me. Dad will agree that I need to get this done. Now you listen to me. I'm your elder. You will respect me or I will punish you. Me. And if you do, I can literally pack my shit and walk the mile to my mom's, so you can try. This apparently set her off cause she cocked her hand back and slapped me on the side of the head. She however didn't hit the side of my face but the side of my head right above my ear. I really couldn't feel anything cause I have nerve damage around there, so it felt kind warm, I guess. She on the other hand literally sprained her wrist by slapping a metal plate full force. She tried to lie and said I grabbed her wrist, but I was able to prove her wrong because my computer was still recording when she hit me. So yeah, my dad's side of the family didn't really believe anything she said anymore. My dad finally divorced her 3 years later. Last I heard she went to prison for assaulting one of my half-brother's teachers for a reason I can't really recall. Luckily my dad got custody of him and she is still in prison now. Edit. This is one of many stories about her, so I'll be posting more stories later. Thanks for reading.